Well, good morning, April 16th from Iowa, and it definitely looks like we should be deer hunting rather than turkey hunting. We're currently in a winter storm warning, and it's going to be snowing all day. We decided to give it a shot anyway this morning. Came to a spot that we actually killed a bird right here. Collins and I did with his nephew last week, and we heard him gobble, thought he was on the ground coming. And I just looked up, and I could see him in the tree. He still hasn't gotten down, so I don't know what to expect. He definitely knows we're here. You can see the decoys, and he's gobbled twice. But it'll be interesting to see how long it takes him to fly down. It's a beautiful morning. Feels like we should be deer hunting right now, but we'll see how this shakes out. Hopefully it just flies down and runs right in. We'll see what happens. Well, that changed quick. This bird's still in this tree. And we got these two birds over here to hammer. They were coming right in. They must have seen something. And they got all spooked. But then they were coming off to our right, did a couple of yelps, calmed them down a little bit, and got a shot off. And I think I got the one. But I'm gonna pop out here and go see. We're gonna watch his back first, actually. Give it probably 5-10 minutes. And then hopefully he's just right on the other side of this hill. It's cold. Now you guys see me shaking. That's because we just heard him start flopping right there. So where I hit him, he just went right over and died. All of a sudden it's really cold. Man, what? Bird in the snow. Great morning to be out in the turkey woods. Something I'm never gonna forget. Turkey hunting in the snow, something I've never done. And my buddy Tim's behind the camera. He's up from Louisiana, and it was just a blast. Couldn't ask for anything better. So got one more tag to fill in Iowa, and I don't know. We're gonna get him up here, take some photos, and couldn't ask for anything better. Thanks for watching, guys.
In this spot, I've got to pull two sets, and basically this is going to be more about the evolution of a stand than really any particular lessons learned from each of the two that I'm pulling. Back in 2009, that was the first year, I think it was the first year or the second year that I had this planted into food plots. This field that I'm standing in, I think was in beans, yes it was, and then that runway back behind me circled all the way back into the timber, a big long piece that ran clear back into the timber. That was all planted to beans. And the deer would come out, follow, it's another ridge back there where that narrow field is at. They would follow that around, then they would circle and come down through here, and then they'd come out into this direction eventually. But I didn't know that at the time, And of course, the first reaction is always to go where the deer come out, because that's where you feel like you have the best chance of killing one, of seeing deer. So my first stand set, you can see it in the distance. There's a tall hickory tree back there. It's right where the field turns and heads back into the timber. That's where we set up originally. That was in 2009. I remember late in November of 2009, I had a buck show up there. It was a deer that we came to know really well. It was a deer that we nicknamed Bubba. He was a big 8-pointer then, probably pushing 170 inches, real heavy mass. He came from right here at this gate, walked across that grassy field and came and worked a scrape right in front of that hickory tree. And I stopped him for the shot, and he ducked the string, moved at the sound of the bow, and I hit him kind of up high in the shoulder. And it didn't do any damage to him really to speak of. I mean, it was a flesh wound. We trailed him, for a day or two, and really just didn't find any sign of him. A couple drops of blood. And then later in the year, back in probably right before Christmas, we found him back out in this field, feeding on the beans. So that was the start of the story of this buck we call Bubba. That story goes on and on for a number of years. I mean, I found that deer dead in 2012. He died from EHD as an 8-year-old, and he would have scored like 205 inches as a 8-year-old. He just kept getting bigger every year, which was kind of interesting. But anyway, that story of Bubba started back there at that hickory tree. The problem we had with that spot was just getting out of there at the end of legal shooting time. So it was no problem getting in there. You could walk down the field, no problem. But at the end, you had all these deer and all this food and everything here. And if you dropped off the back down into the ditch, it would have been a really roundabout way to get back to the vehicle. I mean, that would have been an option possibly, but we felt like it was just too poor of an option compared to moving in this direction. So the next year, we put a tree stand up in one of these cedar trees. You can see behind me about maybe 40, 50 yards away, there's a big cedar tree. So that's where the stand went next, was into that cedar tree. Now, there's a double set in there that we've got to pull today too. And we hunted that a fair amount. I remember, I can't remember the year, but Frank Miniter, he was the editor of the NRA's magazine back then. Frank came out and hunted, and he killed a buck out of that cedar tree. It was coming basically right underneath the tree stand, heading out into the field there, and he shot one there. Our son killed a buck during the youth season that was standing out in the middle of this field out of that cedar tree. And trying to think if we had any other successes. I don't think so. So the next evolution then, I think a year or two later, I put the redneck blind in. So this is just right over my left shoulder. And if you watch Midwest Whitetail, you've seen tons and tons of hunts that take place out of that blind. In fact, I don't know how many bucks we've killed out of it, 6 or 7, I think. And just this past season, in late October, I killed a really nice 10-pointer right out in this little plot out of that blind there. So we don't hunt the other two anymore. The natural evolution was away from those higher impact stands to this one, to this blind. So now at the end of legal shooting time, it's easy enough because of all the cedar trees to sneak down the ladder on the back and slip out. I mean, if the deer are right here, 10 yards away, you're not going to get away with it. But if they're on the back side of this little plot or around the corner or wherever, they're not going to know that we were even there. So any kind of I guess it'd be a northwest or a west wind blowing away from this worked really well. So the lesson in all of that was stands evolve over time. Sometimes the first spot you pick just doesn't work. It has too many flaws. It was obvious, it made sense at the moment, but over time you'll learn that sometimes you got to go with stands that have better entry and exit and maybe aren't quite as good from the standpoint of the deer movement coming past them. Excuse me, but you can hunt them consistently without spooking anything. The other lesson here was don't necessarily have to hunt where the deer come out. You kind of are better off hunting where the deer end up. So they come out of the timber and they work in this direction. If we set up right where they come out of the timber, you're going to have problems with the wind and getting out and so forth. But if you set up where they come to, like we did here, a lot of times it works out better. So that's this one. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of conversation about those two stand locations, but over time they've just been phased completely out. Don't even hunt them. Even forgot the one was back there. I just remembered it here a few days ago. So we're going to grab both of these now, and then I've got another spot nearby that I'm going to talk about too. I just finished up planting these 3 small food plots in this bottom to clover. I'm going to move about a half a mile and work on a ridgetop. But in the meantime, let's join Mike Reed. Mike spent some time talking about the best stand on the river farm and how that spot evolved.
Well, Grant and I are down here at a river bottom farm today. We're gonna get some projects done. I'm really excited. A couple weeks ago I closed on a neighboring wetland. So to our south, the neighbor sold 339 acres of WRP, and I was able to add that to what we have here. So now Jared and I have over 550 acres right here of this wetland habitat, and that's going to really help us in our management strategies and keeping some of these deer alive and letting them grow up over a few years. So Jared and I and some of the guys came out in March and we did a little shed hunting. You know, late season we hunted here quite a bit. We had decent food for the first time in 3 years of ownership, and we had a lot of bucks in here during late muzzleloader, and we thought we were going to rack up on sheds, but it wasn't the case. I'm not sure where they go later in the winter, but they were still out here eating the turnips, and I'm sure there's some sheds we missed. But we unfortunately did not find merino, but we did find a couple matched sets of some of our younger, better deer. One of them is the broken 4-year-old. You guys will recognize this deer. We saw this deer a bunch of times. This is the one that snort wheezed under Jared's stand in November, and it was actually the buck that I had an encounter with my last sit after merino. He walked into 20 yards, and we saw him multiple times throughout the year. Beautiful deer. He's actually sort of reminiscent of merino's rack, and we're really looking forward to see what he's going to turn into next year. He got busted up, but he's got really long beams, and he's about a low 160s, mid 160s last year as a 4-year-old. So pretty excited to see what he's going to turn into. Another deer that we saw just about every time we came out here, tons and tons of footage of him, is this little 3-year-old crab claw 10. Jared had actually filmed this deer in velvet, and he stayed on the farm all season, and then we filmed him all through November, and late season he came out every single hunt. And really cool deer, got some cool character points down at the bases, just a little basket rack, nice long tines. Really looking forward to seeing what this deer turns into. And last weekend, or a couple weeks ago, I was out here doing some work with the tractor and picked up the black-eyed 10. You guys will remember this deer from the day I shot Todd Gurley. He walked in right under the tree with Jake and I in the tree, and then later Todd Gurley came out. Just a really nice solid 10. We just found the one side off of him, and he's another one that we saw just about every hunt. I mean, late season, no matter what tree we were in, it seemed like he would come walk by. So cool deer, another deer, really looking forward to seeing what he turns into. And then while we're here, we're gonna go take a look at one of my favorite spots on the farm. So we moved into this area that you've heard me refer to as the skinny pinch. This is my favorite area on the farm to hunt. It's not so much the tree, even though we've had a lot of success out of the tree, but it's really just the area. And what makes it good is it's just a natural funnel. The portion of land here that Jared and I own is 224 acres. We've got 10 acres across the river, 14 acres is the actual river, and then we have this long peninsula that's about 100 acres, and we got 100 acres or so of wetland. And we leave the peninsula as sanctuary. It's hard to get in and out of there. We kind of hunt the neck of it. So we're really hunting 100 acres, and we've moved all around, but this area is just a natural funnel. And the reason is we've got the river here, and then we have this other body of water, this slough. And even though the slough doesn't always have water in it, the deer tend to funnel through this little strip of timber. On the other side of the slough is the wetland grass. And so it's just a neat little area that is fairly open, and the deer funnel through it. It's about 100 yards wide, but we have some down trees, we have piles of driftwood, we have some old metal scrap junk, and there's a couple trails that the deer just tend to use frequently. And this is actually the tree that we often hunt out of here over my shoulder. The previous landowner was a traditional archer, and he had this stand hung. It's kind of grew into the tree, and so he didn't take it down. You know, it's a big cottonwood. It's a split trunk cottonwood, so there's not a lot of cover on it, but it's really in a good spot. There's only a little bit of distance between us and the slough, so not many deer walk on that end. And there's two primary trails here, one at 15 yards and one at 30 yards. And we keep a camera, we've had a camera on that trail, the 30 yards away since we've owned the place. And there's always lots of daylight activity. All the bucks on the farm, you know, come and go on that camera. Gronk, when I shot Gronk, was literally just 85 yards from here. There's a little grass thicket right along the river that also helps kind of pinch them in a little bit closer. So even though the deer technically can walk through there, there's just a few different edge features that make the deer walk through this area. And while this cottonwood is, like I said, there's not a lot of cover on it, it's got a double trunk and the trunks are big. And Jared has successfully hunted out of the stand hanging here, even though it's not very high, and not gotten picked off. Late season, we hunted here, or he hunted here quite a bit with his bow. You know, it's a little bit more challenging that time of year. I tend to get higher, so I actually climb, like the morning I shot Prodigy, I climb into the old stand and then I hang a few more sticks and hang up a pair of stands higher up. So I get 30 feet or so up there. And that helps keep us out of that direct line of sight. I don't often get picked off when I'm that high up. It's a little bit more challenging to shoot, but it's effective at getting the deer to come right under you. We've only owned this farm for 3 years, and one of the years we didn't really hunt it because it flooded. That was 18. 2017, we had lots of good hunts out here, out of this very tree, same sort of thing, did a hanging hunt on top of the old stand. We had merino come under, multiple other good encounters, you know, killed Gronk just across the way. And then last year was the first year we really, both of us spent a lot of time hunting out here. I sold my Van Buren County farm, and this was my primary place to hunt last year. So lots of sits. This little pinch is really excellent in the rut and also obviously late season, as you saw. So that broken 4-year-old, this is the tree that Jared encountered him out of when he snort wheezed under the tree. He had multiple encounters with merino out of this tree. In fact, the night after I shot at merino out in the food plot, you know, Jared was in this tree and had another encounter with him. I forgot to mention that earlier, but that's actually the last time we saw merino. We did not get any trail camera pictures of him since then. We pulled cards in March, and I'm assuming he shed early. I mean, that was January 7th or so when Jared had an encounter with him, and he looked healthy and fine. I think it's unlikely that someone else killed him. We certainly didn't hear that happen, so hopefully he's made it through the winter, and we'll certainly be looking forward to picking him up this fall. So we're gonna move on and start getting some projects done. I mentioned earlier I just closed on that 340 acres, and I'm really pumped about that. We're gonna do a segment later on kind of showing you guys that piece and showing how we're gonna pick it apart. But I brought a redneck gravity feeder in, a 750-pound feeder, and I'm basically gonna set it up right in the middle of Jared and I's piece and that new piece. I brought out 5 cutty backs. We're gonna kind of spread those around and see if we can't get some pictures of some of these bucks growing their antlers. Well, that's a wrap. Got a lot of work done today. Got the feeder out with a corn protein mixture. Got 5 cameras out, and I'm pretty pumped about this new property. I think it's going to add a lot to our management potential for Jared and I, and I'm pretty interested to see what sort of new bucks we pick up on camera. We're just, you know, we're kind of in the middle of the off season. We've been cranking along. Got a lot of burning done earlier while we're and shed hunting, and now we're getting the planting done. So we'll keep bringing all this stuff to you guys as we get it done.
So Mike and I have both talked about the best stands that we've got on our farms. And they have one thing in common. These really great stands don't happen overnight. Normally they take years of evolution. You have to learn how exactly the deer are using the area, how to get in and out of it without bumping anything. There's a lot to learn. Just fine tuning to move from one tree to another can make all the difference in the world. So while I've been gone, while we've been watching Mike's segment, I have been finishing up my clover planting. So I started down in the valley, and down there it's moisture soil. So I was planting the frigid forage bottomland clover down there. Some clovers do well in moist conditions, and some do better in normal, you know, dry to well-drained conditions. The bottomland clover is ideal for those wetter areas down in these bottoms. So that's what I planted there. And up on this ridge now, I just finished up with the Pure Trophy Clover blend. And Planted both areas with the Genesis no-till drill. And like I've talked over the years on Midwest Whitetail, I really like no-tilling because you disturb the soil so much less. You have one pass instead of having to till it up and then come back again and plant. And also the subsoil moisture is there available to germinate the seed very quickly. If you till it up, all that soil moisture dries out and you don't have nearly as much there to germinate the seeds. So with the no-till process, the seed goes right into the moisture and germinates very quickly. We're going to come back again hopefully next week with another round of these the coolest thing I've learned about whitetails segments. I did one a couple weeks ago, and I'd really like to hear from some of the other guys what they've learned over these past 10 years that they thought was most interesting. Well, that's it for this week. I appreciate you joining me. We'll see you right back here again next week for the next episode of Midwest Whitetail, and remember to always dream big.